Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Personal Health Summit 2015. We're super excited to have Michael Grandner with us today, talking about sleep and health and the truth about sleep and how that affects and influences your health. The first thing I'd like to start with is a huge thank you to you. Thank you for investing your time. Thank you for investing everything to be here to listen to these calls. Now, we have 30 experts from all over the world talking about sleep, nutrition, exercise, consciousness, mindfulness, science, medicine, World Health Solutions, biotechnology, so many different conversations about all aspects of health, so that you can actually have so much information that you can collate and find out what's exactly right for you at this point in time on your personal health journey. So thank you for being here. Thank you to our major sponsors, the Ultimate Human Foundation, for the great work they're doing in eliminating chronic pain and disease from the planet. And a huge thank you to PH360, who's looking at taking personalized health insights and epigenetics and actually putting that into a way that you can understand what right now, what's tangible for you to be happy and healthy in foods and exercise and many different other factors. So please go and check themselves out. There's onlinehealthsummit.com/PH360 is where you can find out some more information there. So without any further ado, I'd love to welcome today Michael. Michael, thank you so much for being here. Dr. Grandner is the Director of Sleep and Health Research Program at the University of Arizona and an Assistant Professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the UA College of Medicine. He's board certified in behavioral sleep medicine. His research focuses on sleep and sleep-related behaviors, or how sleep-related behaviors are related to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, neurocognitive functioning, mental health, and longevity. Looking forward to this conversation. He's published over 75 articles and chapters on issues relating to sleep and health, appearing in journals such as Sleep, Appetite, Obesity, Sleep Medicine, International Journal of Obesity, and the Journal of the American Medical Association. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you here.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Beautiful. Well, Michael, I'd love just to start finding a little bit about you. We love starting the call so people can get an understanding about who you are, and everybody listening in is really fascinated about sleep. It's such a common topic, but it's so unknown. It's mysterious, this whole craziness of sleep. No one really knows what you should do or when you should do it, and we hear just standard figures that come out. So really looking forward to just hearing about how you got into the place you are today, and then starting a great conversation about sleep and health for everybody listening in today.
Great. So I've always been interested in sleep. Even from when I was a kid and a teenager, I would go to the store and find whatever books on sleep and dreams that I could. I always thought it was very interesting. And so that was why when I went to college, I was a psychology major, because I thought, because of my interest in this area. I didn't realize this was like a job that you could have until a friend of mine, the person who lived in the dorm right next to them, was all excited. She said, oh, I got a job at the sleep lab. And I said, we have a sleep lab? And she said, yeah. So, and it turns out that the person who's running it was teaching a course. So I signed up right away. I took the course. I loved it. Afterwards, I volunteered to work in the lab. And so I worked in the lab for 2 years as a student volunteer. And that's how I learned about academic research and saw what it was like and decided this was what I wanted. And so then went to a graduate school program where I could do that and work in a research lab doing sleep while being a grad student, and sort of went from there. So yeah, I never realized this was, being a scientist that studies sleep was actually a job that I could have. But now that I've got it, it's the greatest thing.
That's really cool. And Michael, I'd love just to jump into things head first today, because sleep's such a great topic, and
Sure.
I'm really looking forward to it. And the aim of this summit is all about personalized health. So we're understanding more about what we know about sleep, about if sleep's the same for everybody, if sleep's different, if some people can function off less sleep, some people function off more sleep, and all these sorts of great topics and conversations. So we're going to open up the floor to some questions as we go here. This is an interactive session, so if you have questions about sleep or questions for Michael as we go, please either raise your hand to request to join us or pop your questions in the chat box. We've already got questions coming through, which is great. So keep your comments and keep your questions coming through, guys. It means that we can interact and help make this very applicable to you listening right now, or if you're watching the replay at some stage in the future. So Michael, just the first question about sleep, I guess maybe even just to start with, why is sleep so important for our healing or for our health is probably a great way to start, and maybe some science that exists to support that.
Yeah, sleep is a lot like diet. You know, it's a biological needs. We need to eat. We need to sleep. There's a very small list of things that are biological requirements for human life. It's a very small list. Sleep is on it, just like food, water, and air. But unlike something like breathing, you can't meet these biological needs passively. You can't just, as long as there's air in the room, you're going to breathe, you'll be fine. But like diet, to meet these biological needs, we need to do things. We need to engage in behaviors. And these behaviors are where it gets really interesting, because this is where we get variability. This is, you know, it's no secret that it's no coincidence that most people prefer to sleep at night. There's a lot of genetics that control sleep drive and preferences, but the way humans actually sleep is very much driven by, just like diet, driven by the environment, driven by social and environmental constraints, driven by beliefs and attitudes, and that plays out in our health. And so when we think about sleep, we shouldn't necessarily think about it in a way that's different than how we think about diet. Every cell in the body requires nutrition and fuel to function. So what we eat is very much a part of what makes us who and what we are, and sleep is very much the same thing. So a way to think about sleep is why do we sleep? Well, the reason that we sleep is that our biology, if you go back all the way back through evolution, you know, you see creatures have decided that we live on a planet that has a day and a night that circles, you know, that spins on an axis in front of a sun, and biology decided to make use of that. And you can see going all the way back that many physiologic and biologic systems make use of the day and night to perform many regulatory functions. I mean, we aren't the same across the 24 hours. Our biology is built around a day-night cycle of light and dark, and the sleep-wake cycle is one of the main forces in that system. And the reason it's important is because we're built around it. It's one of the foundations in which most, if not all, of our physiologic systems are built around. If you look at how our body maintains, how our body heals, recovers, and just performs regular daytime functions, you can't just look at the daytime, you have to look at the night. If you look at most hormone systems fluctuate on these 24-hour systems. Most systems in the body stay in balance and stay working together because of the sleep and wake and other 24-hour patterns that keep them in line. So it's not just about you're functioning during the day and you've depleted whatever energy you have and you need to sleep to somehow rebuild. It's more than just that. Sleep is the other side of the coin, and you can't have one without the other.
Beautiful, Michael. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And those words are beautiful to start and set the scene for where we're going to go with this conversation. So
great.
Thank you for bringing that information and even the understanding and science to us with what we've got going on. So, Michael, I'd love just to find out a bit more about, so that's a great understanding about some of the biology that exists. And you're right, we've had a couple of conversations where we've talked a little bit about chronobiology and what you suggest there in the 24-hour cycle of light dark that exists, and how our hormones do fluctuate, and even symptoms from a health point of view fluctuate at different times of the day. Which is a fascinating conversation. I'd love just to find out just a little bit more about health, and obviously you've done so much research looking at the relationship between sleep and cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, mental health, longevity. It's a fascinating area. Absolutely love the research that you're doing and how you're bringing up this information to the public. Can you tell us a little bit about the way that sleep influences our health in that regards, and maybe if you wanted to use a few examples of either a few of those conditions or what you find would be fantastic. There's a lot of people that will be listening to this today that are here right now watching the replay that are probably suffering from a lot of those different diseases or diagnoses, or maybe even just suffering from other illnesses or other pain states or other stress that may exist that are really going to benefit a lot from this conversation. So thank you so much for sharing this.
Right. So one pathway linking sleep and health that's been fleshed out a bit is the link with obesity. So it may surprise people that on average, people who sleep less than 6 hours in general are more likely to be obese. Not only that, they're more likely to gain weight over time. And so there's been a lot of research into why. Why is that the case? And this may be one of the factors that leads to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and all of these bad outcomes is that obesity seems to be upstream of that one way or the other. And that seems to happen through a number of different pathways. So for example, hormones that control appetite, hunger are on these 24-hour cycles. And so there's a reason why if you eat dinner in the evening and you don't eat breakfast till the morning, you can go these long hours without eating when you're asleep, because you have these hormone systems in place to control that. Well, it turns out when someone is sleeping less, and let's say you take a young, otherwise healthy person into the laboratory, you reduce the amount of sleep over time. Within a day or two, their body starts showing the effects, and their metabolism starts changing, their hormones start changing. So for example, the hormones that help you feel full are decreased. The hormones that help you be hungry are increased. Insulin and glucose that drive metabolism and energy use in the body get thrown off. And so after a couple of weeks, people start looking like they would look if they were diabetic. But that's not the case. They're young, healthy people. You give them a few more nights of healthy sleep, they'll look like they're back to normal. So that's one example. So in terms of how sleep throwing off hormones, sleep throwing off insulin and glucose, but then there's also patterns of behavior. So for example, when you're not sleeping, you have impaired mental functioning. So for example, people who are sleep deprived are not as able to make good decisions. Their ability to weigh risks and benefits, to make good long-term projections and make good healthy choices is impaired. And what's critical here is people don't realize how impaired they are. If you ask people how impaired they are and then show them, it's massively different. So here you have a situation where your body is primed because of some of these hormonal disruptions to want to eat more. And now your mind is less able to make these healthy choices. In addition, you're awake. You have more opportunity to eat. So one of the things we see is in the lab, when you sleep deprive somebody, they consume 300 to 500 more calories per day. And most of that is actually occurring at night, it seems, when people are awake, when they probably should be sleeping. So that there's a number of different pathways linking sleep to obesity, and those are just a few. Other things to think about is that you have both these physiologic and neurocognitive effects, and they, just like with obesity and a lot of these conditions, they all work together. So not only will your body be less able to maintain and repair itself, your inflammatory system gets elevated, elevating heart disease risk. Your blood vessels aren't working as well as previously. You're also not making as healthy decisions, and you're putting yourself more at risk. And that's just insufficient sleep. Not to mention sleep disorders like insomnia, which is a major risk factor for developing mental illness, especially depression and anxiety disorders, long-term insomnia is, and sleep apnea, which is way more common than anyone realized, especially in men, especially as they're middle-aged or older, which takes a massive toll, not only in terms of oxidative stress around the body, but also in terms of the heart and cardiovascular disease, where people who have sleep apnea, especially if it's severe, and especially if it's untreated, really only if it's untreated. If it's treated, you're okay. But people with severe sleep apnea, they're way more likely to have heart attacks and strokes years before they would have if their sleep apnea were treated. So there's a lot of connections here between sleep and health in the body.
Wow, you're right on that fact, and thank you for sharing all that. It's really amazing to see, and often we probably don't even stop to think how much sleep influences our health, and yeah, as you described that, it's so very clearly, it's so very clear to understand the link between what's happening here in terms of health, in terms of sleep, in terms of all those sort of behaviours. So it's great information to us, Michael. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate your perspective here and the information that you guys are finding out and what you're studying. So. Michael, I'd like just to find out a little bit more about, like, you're talking about sleep in the lab there, you're talking about sleep deprivation that may, you may be able to induce in the lab setting to be able to study these sorts of things. What's a definition of this? What is sleep deprivation?
Yeah.
A bit more about sleep and what we need to be considering, for those listening at home right now. There's a lot of people that probably feel like they don't get enough sleep. Maybe there's some lucky people that get too much sleep or not enough sleep or everything in between. Where do we start here? It's
a really important question. I have some studies going on right now to try and better answer it. You'd think we'd have a clear answer, so we have an answer at the population level, where it seems clear that on average, people who are sleeping 6 hours per night or less are more likely to develop these health conditions. And that seems to go up the lower you are. We also show that people in general who sleep 9 hours or more on average are also more likely to not live as long and develop a number of health issues. That's a whole other question. To be totally honest, so you'll see some recommendations that just came out this year from 2 different organizations. Both of them sort of had the lower limit of the recommended amount of sleep being 7 hours. The question is, what about the people between 6 and 7? And we don't know very much about this group because the sleep deprivation studies in the laboratory usually look at 7 to 8 versus 4, 5, or 6, and they usually don't have much in the middle. And the population level studies don't usually have a lot of precision, where they're pretty good at distinguishing people at the very low levels. But in the 6 to 7 range, which to be honest, a lot of people are, it's hard to know. And this is probably where individual vulnerabilities will either emerge or protect you. And right now, that's a research question that a number of us are looking into, trying to figure out how to predict whether you're someone who's vulnerable or not, especially in this range. There may be people for whom 7, 8 hours is enough. There may be people for whom 5, 6 hours is plenty. But this is an open question that stay tuned over the next few years. There may be studies coming out to try and help explain this question. The problem is, if you ask people how they're doing, they may say they're doing great, they may say they're doing terrible, but it doesn't seem to correlate with what their body's doing at all. So for example, in the laboratory, when you sleep deprive people down to 5, 6 hours, you can almost universally start seeing some of these neurocognitive impairments. When we looked at some population data on drowsy driving, which is sort of a real-world example of some of these neurocognitive impairments because you're not able to maintain wakefulness, we found that, yes, people who are sleeping less are more likely to experience drowsy driving. But then when we restricted the sample only to people that say, 30 out of 30 days, I am completely well-rested, only looking at those people, the relationship was the same. Even if you say you're totally well-rested, if you're sleeping 5 to 6 hours a night, you were about 3 times as likely to also be experiencing drowsy driving compared to 7-hour sleepers. So, and this is something that's been showing up over and over again, that people are just like you're not a good judge of how drunk you are, you're not a good judge of how sleepy you are, even if you think you are. So that it makes it tough, because when someone comes into the office and says, I'm sleeping 6 hours, I feel fine, I feel like I'm performing well, am I? I'm working on the answer, how to answer that question. For now, the place to look is not how you're feeling, but how is this impacting your life? And if you're sleeping 5 to 6 hours, to try and find extra time and see if it improves things. So it's sort of like, okay, well, if I exercise more, would that benefit my health? Well, I don't know. Exercise more and let's see how it benefits your health. See how you feel afterwards. You might not think it's going to have an improvement, but it probably will. Let's do a little experiment. As a scientist, and I do this in clinic all the time. I do experiments with patients, and usually they end up much more surprised than they think that they were going to be.
That's beautiful, Michael. And I think if there was one message for today, even if out of all of this, is take a leaf out of Michael's book and become your own scientist. I love that, Michael. Go and do some little experiments. If it's just doing some exercise and see what happens. If it's just changing the food you eat and see what happens. If it's just getting a little bit more sleep and see what happens.
Do it. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong that it's not going to help you.
I love that. I love that. So if everybody could take some ownership of being your own scientist, get a little bit more sleep. It sounds like we'll try and get a little bit less than 9 hours sleep. And a little bit more than 6 hours sleep is kind of the magic range that we know at the moment. And looking forward to a lot more conversations in this field. And it's amazing, really, like how far advanced we are in so many different areas of science and medicine. Yet it's still quite elusive. This conversation about personalized health is that how much sleep does each person need? Well, it's different in many different factors and many different reasons. And I really appreciate how you share very honestly and openly about how we're not maybe our best judge of character, about sleepiness and how much we actually need. I think you mentioned the example just before about, if we were drunk, then we wouldn't know, we wouldn't be a good judge of that, how drunk we were at a particular point in time. And this is really, it's something that brings me back. I spent some time over with the US Army, looking about going to do some advising about health, and we had some great discussions about sleep. And of course, there's many different times in people's lives when they don't get to choose how much sleep they have. And maybe there's people listening in that are studying for exams. Maybe you've got young children who you need to get up throughout the night. There's maybe doing shift work. There's many different reasons why we don't get the sleep that we want to get in those nighttime hours. And we know that it affects us in a very significant way. And I think you probably know the statistics better than I do. It was a few years ago actually, but looking at if it was 24 to 36 hours or 48 hours straight without sleep was the equivalent of being over 0.05 in terms of alcohol consumption. Right. So often, if we're very sleep deprived, we're walking around in the same mental space as if we were drunk. And that's something that that's a very powerful understanding for those that aren't getting enough sleep regularly. Is something we need to be really mindful of how that's influencing a lot of our lives. Would you mind just sharing a little bit about that, Michael, with some of the insights? We've got heaps of questions coming through that we're going to jump to a few of those in a minute. So please keep coming, guys. But just to share with us about we've got some understandings about the ideal amounts of sleep. But that life exists for a lot of people, and things happen, and there's a lot of reasons why people don't get the amount of sleep that they do. What sort of options do we have, or what sort of advice have we got for people who are in those situations, who maybe have shift work, or maybe do have young kids, or maybe go to sleep and their mind's still racing, and they're not getting enough hours in the nighttime hours? What do we know about that so far, and how can we start to apply some things to consider changing that for some people?
Sure. The first thing to think about is, are you showing any clear warning signs? So one clear warning sign that something is up with your sleep is if no matter how much you sleep, you wake up feeling exhausted, like you just ran a marathon or whatever, and 10, 15, 20 minutes later, it doesn't go away. It's normal to wake up feeling tired. It's called sleep inertia, but it should go away after, at most a half an hour to an hour. If you wake up and you're exhausted and it just doesn't go away, that's a sign that even if you slept through the night, your sleep was very shallow and something was interfering. Often this is could be something like pain or something like sleep apnea. Another sure sign that's something that you're not getting enough sleep. So if you want to, I guess this harkens back to the previous question of how do you know if I'm not getting enough sleep? If you're out within 2 or 3 minutes when your head hits the pillow, you went to bed too late. It should take you a few minutes. It shouldn't take you more than 10, 15 minutes, but it should take a few minutes. If you're out right away, you're probably a little sleep deprived. So if it's taking you more than 30 minutes to fall asleep in the beginning of the night on more than 3 nights a week, or if you're up for more than a half an hour during the night, at least 3 nights a week, that's another sign you have an insomnia that's a level that just some simple sleep tips are probably not going to fix at that point. If you are snoring so loud that people have to sleep in the other room, that's a sign that, so what snoring is, it's air having a hard time getting through the airway at night, and it's vibrating. Sometimes it's fine, or at least not linked to major health issues. But if it's really loud, it means your body's really fighting, especially if you are snore really loud and suddenly stop and then pick up again. You probably aren't aware of this, but if you're sleeping next to somebody, they may know this, where you're snoring and then you stop, and then for a few seconds, and then you have this gasp. That's an apnea. That's a witnessed apnea. And if you're doing that, there's more where that came from. So these are signs that something is going on. It's worth talking to your doctor about. Maybe get a referral to a sleep specialist, because there are sleep specialists who know this better than anybody in terms of what questions to ask. So if you're struggling during the day, take a look at your sleep, and there may be something going on there. In terms of what people can do, there's sleep. So if you have more of a mild problem, so one thing that you could think about is not necessarily maybe look for an extra hour or 2 of sleep. Look for an extra 10 minutes. Look for an extra 15 minutes. Do you really need to check those extra few emails before going to bed? That's what, give yourself a little bit of time, see if it helps, extend it slowly over time. Another idea would be that if you're the kind of person who gets into bed and your mind is just going and going and going, even if it's not worrying or anything severe, it's just you're thinking and thinking and thinking, that's a sure sign that you didn't give yourself enough time to wind down. You haven't spent enough time with yourself. There are other speakers talking about meditation and self-directed thinking. What's happened is we go through our lives so distracted. We never spend time with ourselves. And here we are in bed. Now we have no distractions. And finally, your mind has said, okay, now I've got your attention. This is what I'm thinking about. Well, if you're going to do it anyway, do it out of bed. Because the more time you spend awake, tossing and turning and thinking, you're programming your brain to be awake in bed, not to sleep. So that's another thing. If you're having trouble sleeping, the best thing you can do is get out of bed. Don't strengthen that bed and wake connection. Make the bed about sleep. And if you're not sleeping, get up, do something else, try again later. It won't do you any good to try there fighting to try and sleep. Wait a little bit, try again. If it doesn't work, get out of bed again. In the short term, you might end up sleeping a little less, but in the long term, you're going to prevent developing a more severe insomnia.
That's a great tip, Michael. Thank you for sharing that. It's very powerful, actually, and the link between bed and sleep, I really like that, and hopefully everybody can really take that message on board. That when you go to bed to sleep. It really is an important link. So Michael, I just want to, I'm going to just ask one more question, and then we're going to jump to some questions. We've got so many questions coming through, so thank you everybody for your great questions. I just was interested to see what we know in the research so far about the link between sleep and between our diet and our exercise habits and things like that. So I know that Dr. Dean Ornish is someone who's looked at a lot of that, and he talks in a way that says, well, if we're doing the right things during the day, we'll sleep at night, and that's sort of his take on it. And there's a number of others that have obviously differing opinions, but just interested to see what we know from the research about how that links with the diet, exercise, and our, I guess, environment and lifestyle, and how we sleep.
Yeah, it looks like diet, exercise, and sleep really are the three pillars of health, and in that way, they all support each other. So the people who are eating healthier tend to sleep better. The people who are eating healthier tend to be able to have the energy and ability to exercise more. The people who exercise more tend to eat better. They also tend to sleep better. The people who sleep better tend to have the energy to be able to get physical activity, and their hormones that are controlling diet and cravings tend to be in better balance. So these are all, so when you're sleeping well, it supports healthy diet and exercise. When you're eating well, it supports healthy sleep and physical activity. And when you're getting activity, it supports healthy sleep, it supports a healthy diet. And these all sort of support each other, which is good news in that if you're struggling with one, maybe go towards the other. So, one of the biggest struggles in the diet and exercise literature is actually getting people to change, because people know that they need to be doing better, but they're fighting an uphill battle. And sometimes sleep is the weak link in the chain. Sometimes, okay, I cannot find the time, I cannot find the mental space or energy, and I just cannot make healthy food choices with food. Well, and if you're also not sleeping well, maybe let's talk about your sleep first. Get you sleeping better, help get you that energy during the day you need to get moving, and also might help with some of the mental clarity with the food choices, and also some of the cravings with food, because you're not trying to feed a sleep-deprived body. So, not saying that sleep is more important. It's just sometimes sleep is an easier thing, is an easier fix than diet and exercise. And so sometimes it's the weak link in the chain, but they do all seem to support each other.
Beautiful, Michael. Thank you for sharing that insight. And it is great to see, a lot of the facts, the science is supporting that everything in our body is interrelated, and it's not just as simple as saying it's just food or it's just moving. All of them affect each other, and it's really important to understand that you can start. And I love the way that you just share that right then, is that start somewhere that's the most easy for you. Sleep is an easy thing to do for a lot of people, and there's a lot of other things that you can do around in your life to help you sleep better. So there's lots of hope for us yet for those that aren't sleeping so well. And we're going to jump into a few questions about that now. Sure. One quick question first, just on the research side of things. Denise asks, How often do we have to do this quantity of sleep for an experiment to be proven? And it's a great question, Denise, because often there's a lot of people.
So I would say before, when you do anything, when you make a change, give yourself at least a week or two. I mean, at least the first few nights are going to be awkward, and you're going to be adjusting anyway. And sometimes it takes, you know, a week or two for things to settle in. But a lot of people I talk to have been struggling with sleep problems for years. And I say, look, you've been struggling with this for what, 10 years times 52 weeks, take 50 weeks. So that's 500 weeks you've been doing this. Give me 2. And that's all I'm asking for. And if you give me 2 good weeks of effort and it doesn't show any benefit, I won't bring it up again. I'll bring up something else, but I won't bring that, but you know, I'm not going to bring that up again. But usually 2 weeks is a good benchmark, because usually it takes at least a few days to adjust. And then it takes, you know, probably takes a week for your body to sort of realign itself.
Beautiful.
And a key here is also consistency. You know, I think someone else had asked a little bit about this, where what about, you know, making up for sleep on the weekends, where, okay, well, I'm getting less sleep during the week and I'm making up for it on the weekends. Well, sleep isn't quite like a bank account where, okay, well, I'm getting paid less here, I'm getting paid more here, it's evening out at the end of the day. It seems to be way more complicated than that. It's sort of like if I eat like crap for 5 days and then I eat a healthy meal for 2 days, all of a sudden is my health as if I was eating healthy all those days? Nah, it doesn't quite work that way. And so think of it more like, you know, how you're eating versus a financial sort of metaphor, which a lot of people use for sleep. They talk about sleep debt, they talk about banking sleep, and to some degree that sort of helps, but it's more about keeping a consistent pattern. Because the other thing that people do when they sleep deprive themselves and then extend on weekends, besides everything else, is they tend to shift time zones in themselves. So they are in one time zone during the week, and they go to bed later and wake up later on the weekend. So they're essentially traveling over a couple time zones. So they end up getting jet lagged without ever traveling. Then they're traveling back during the week. So they're taking a couple days to adjust and taking a couple days to adjust. And these 24-hour cycles, when your internal rhythm and the external rhythm are out of sync, which is what jet lag is, your rhythms start getting out of sync and you start not feeling well. And so you're not performing very well. So it's better to keep consistency, which is sort of bad news because people want to be able to, binge and gorge or starve and gorge on sleep, but it tends not to work out too well.
That's great. I really love that analogy of jet lag. I've never actually thought about it like that. It makes so much sense that we are switching time zones, literally like jumping on a plane. When you do change your habits like that on weekends, it's great. Thank you, Michael. So we're just going to go through and jump to a lot of questions that are coming through here. And thank you so much for the questions. Please feel free to raise your hand or continue posting in the chat box. We're going to interact live with Michael as we go here. Grace says, I've had some sleep problems for years. Sometimes I feel the more I worry about it, the worse it is. I've just gotten used to it. Is this going to be a health issue for me in the future? It's a great question, Grace. And Michael, what do we know about sleep deprivation or sleep issues and future health? I know you've described a lot, but how does this work over time for us?
So something I sort of hinted at earlier is we know a lot about sleep in populations, but not so much about sleep in individuals. We know that people who, for example, aren't getting enough sleep are 20% more likely to develop hypertension and about 30% more likely to develop diabetes over the same time period as someone who's sleeping 7 or 8 hours. Does that mean that's going to happen to you? Who knows? And 20% increased risk. I mean, a lot of people develop hypertension anyway. So it's really hard to know how exactly it's going to bear out on an individual person. But it definitely, so there's a reason why your body needs sleep. And if you're not, it's just sort of like, okay, if I don't eat a perfectly healthy diet my whole life, am I going to die sooner? Maybe, maybe not. But if I eat, fast food for every meal, or at least, several times a week, over years, it's going to build up and it's going to generate accumulated risk. Now, some people can smoke every day for their whole life and never get cancer and never have any ill effects. Those people are pretty rare, but they exist. So it's hard to say what's going to happen at the individual level yet. I mean, like I said, we're working on trying to identify what the markers are. But if this is something you're struggling with for years, chances are it's taking some level of toll, small or large. Just like having an unhealthy diet for years and years, it'll take a toll, small or large, probably.
Yeah, beautiful. And thanks for sharing that, Michael. And we're talking, this summit's all about personalized health and understanding what's right for you. And I think, from the sleep at the moment, we certainly understand that there's a pretty good range. We're looking between 6 and 9 hours, or 7 and 9 hours is going to be around. Yeah. But there's a lot of factors that influence that. And we've had some great conversations in the fields of nutrition, the fields of exercise, and understanding more about what's right in a lot of other areas that, as Michael shared, influence our sleep as well. So we know a lot of information, and we're getting closer and closer to the holy grail in sleep, which is
right.
Beautiful. So thank you for the work you're doing, Michael, and with all your colleagues. It's great for us to be able to understand and take this information and apply to us. And for questions like this with Grace, there's another question here from Dawn that says, "Hi, my problem is I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't get back to sleep." So Michael, if people are in these situations, even though we may not know exactly the right answer for each person individually, do you have some things that people can start to do?
So that's actually a great question, because it's very common. So there's two factors that drive sleep in insomnia, where you have your natural hunger for sleep that builds throughout the day. And then you have your circadian rhythm that promotes wakefulness. So for a lot of people who have an insomnia, where when I think of an insomnia as a wall you have to get over to get to sleep. Now, if you're super hungry for sleep by the time nighttime comes, you can get over that wall no problem. But that hunger for sleep dissipates during the night, and it dissipates rather quickly. And usually after a couple hours, quite a bit of that natural sleep drive has already been satisfied. You need more sleep, but biologically your sleep drive isn't as high as it was when you first fell asleep. And if you have that wall to cross, maybe your sleep drive overpowered it at the beginning of the night. But when you had an awakening during the night, you no longer can get over that wall. The wall's still there. You've never conquered it. It just didn't emerge until later. Now, a lot of people don't realize waking up during the night is totally normal. The average person will wake up 10 to 20 times per night if you look at brainwave activity. It's just, if you ask people, the average person will say they wake up 1 to 3 times a night. It's just because these awakenings are short and you don't form memory for them because they're so brief. But what happens with insomnia is a normal awakening turns long. And that's the problem. It's not that you're waking up, that's the problem. It's what's happening when you wake up. When you wake up, you're no longer able to get back to sleep. So what I would do, or what I would recommend, is that's the sort of situation where if you're staying in bed for long periods of time, get out of bed, do something safe. If it's night, don't fall down the stairs or anything. But you want to keep the lights low. Do something relatively boring, not too rewarding. If you're doing work, that might be so rewarding. You'll find yourself waking up at night to do more work. You want to do something sort of boring. Get back to bed, and try that for a few weeks, and just be really religious about it. If you're awake, get out of bed, and weaken that bed and wake connection. There's probably other things going on, but for a 2-minute response, hopefully that was only 2 minutes. That's probably going to be the most helpful thing in the short term.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Michael. And I love the way that you just describe things. It's really clear, and I think a lot of other questions that are coming through are very related to this. So we might just keep visiting this just a little bit further, if that's okay with you. Noel says, "How do we fix our sleep problems without taking a sleeping pill? I tried that once and felt the next day."
So a lot of people don't realize that there's insomnia treatment research goes back decades, and for at least the last 30 years, non-medication treatments for insomnia have beaten out any prescription drugs. Prescription medications for insomnia have their purpose and have their use, and I'm not going to be the person who says that they're always dangerous and they're never a good idea. But actually, the recommended first-line treatment is not medication. It's something called CBTI, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy for Insomnia. It's been around for decades, and it's very well tested. It's one of the most well-studied non-medication treatments for any kind of illness. It seems to work, not only work really well for insomnia on its own, but even insomnia in the context of pain, cancer remission, depression, PTSD, pretty much any other condition that it's been looked at, it works. It treats the insomnia. And because even these disorders that insomnia is a part of, like depression treatments tend not to fix insomnia because it takes on a life of its own, because you have this programmed being awake in bed that becomes its own thing. And so what CBTI essentially does is it deprograms your brain to be awake in bed by modifying your schedule, working with your natural sleep drive and circadian rhythm, and developing these behavioral tools to essentially sort of hack your sleep schedule and get it on a natural rhythm where when you're in bed, you're asleep and you wake up feeling great. The thing is, there's not a whole lot of people who are experts in CBTI. You can go online, you can go to the Society of Behavioral Sleep Medicine website, which sort of is the organization of people who do non-medical treatments for sleep disorders. You could probably get a list of people there. You could talk to your doctor probably won't know. But if you go to behavioralsleep.org, which is it's a nonprofit organization, that's their website. You can probably get some information there, at least reach out to them, or any professional sleep society wherever you live around the world, whether it's in the United States, Europe, Australia, Asia, even in Africa. There's sleep societies that you could probably Google, reach out to them and say, hey, I'm looking for someone who does behavioral sleep medicine, and they could probably connect you with somebody who's near you. But again, a lot of people don't know about this. Even most doctors have never heard of this, but it's actually very well proven. And essentially what it does, like I said, is it reprograms your sleep schedule in such a way that it removes this bed and wake connection. And even if you have something like pain, which people would think that, there's no way to get you sleeping better if you're in pain, it still works. So yeah, so look into that, CBTI. You can Google it, you'll find out a little more.
Great, thank you, Michael. And for those who are listening live, there's links in the chat box coming to this as we're going through. Michael, Roman says, and thank you for answering all these questions, Michael. It's very much appreciated. We're getting some great feedback coming through from all your answers, so thank you. Roman says, Dr. Grandner, I was quite sleep deprived for a few years from working too much and therefore sleeping too little. Can I reverse the effects of my sleep deprivation over all those years? And I know you mentioned a little bit about sleep banking before, but could you maybe share a little bit about that and maybe any information or research that we know about, about how that may influence our health in the longer term too?
So I can't answer for sure because there isn't data on long-term studies where you have lifetime histories of insufficient sleep, and then how much will it take to reverse any negative effects. However, just like with diet, I mean, if you have a lifetime of poor diet, eating healthy for a week or two isn't necessarily going to get you back exactly where you would have left off, but it's at least going in the right direction. So I use this analogy a lot, this whole sleep and diet connection, because it's very useful in a lot of ways. They're very similar in that way. That yes, maybe a lifetime of insufficient sleep leads you at increased risk for some things, and it's not a death sentence. It's not a sentence of doom. It's just it's increased risk. And if you want to shift that curve and you want to turn that curve in the other direction, it looks like getting better sleep can start shifting that curve in the other direction. But like I said, there's not a whole lot of data out there that have followed people for this long. To be honest, for decades, where there's been all this public health literature, back in the 60s, some of these original studies identified some of the key markers of longevity being smoking, physical activity, diet, alcohol, and sleep. And it just so happens that sleep, if you look at the original literature back in the 60s, it was there. It's just a lot of the public health field never really picked it up. And it's just now we're sort of rediscovering. There hasn't been much research on sleep outside of sleep disorders. But in the past 10, 15 years, it's just exploded with all this stuff that I've been talking about. And so this question of sort of a long-term health sort of outcome Now is the time that people are writing those grants to actually start those studies. So tune in 10 to 15 years. You know, you may see a lot more information about that. So I'm sorry I can't give you more specific information, but I'm just going to tell you the truth, that it's probably the case if you change for the better, you'll probably see some slow change for the better in terms of reduction of risk.
That's great. Thank you, Michael. And there's a lot of comments coming through here. We've got a comment from Gara who says, can I participate in your studies, Michael? I'd love to help. And another question that's coming through that is just asking us, do you have a website with some of this information? Is there ways that people can find out more about you and what you do? And even
just michaelgrandner.com, just my name.com. If you need to reach out to me, there's ways to contact me there. Most of the studies that I'm doing we're bringing people into the lab, so most of the studies are based here, but wherever you are, I probably, you know, there's probably somebody in your area who's doing work related to this, and I can connect you with them. I'm happy, you know, I gotta say, you know, research studies, you know, they're very hard to do, they're very expensive, but at the end of the day, you know, they are, you know, the keystone in all these studies are the people who volunteer. That is honestly, just to be totally honest with you as a scientist, doing human subjects research, the hardest thing to do is to find people willing to volunteer. I mean, even studies that we're doing, I'm not even sleep depriving people. I'm just sort of following people over time in terms of health, not treating an illness. Sometimes it's hard to motivate people to participate. So anybody who's willing to participate in research, you know, thank you. You know, your data are gold to me. You know, every single person, I'm not kidding, is very valuable. So if you know anybody who's willing to participate in research, see where your local university is and look for studies. I mean, really, this is what we struggle the most with, is finding people willing to help.
Well, thank you, Michael. And for those that are interested in helping, please get in touch with Michael, and he can direct you wherever you need to go. It's kind of like the whole concept of donating blood often is that, you know, a lot of people don't like to donate blood, but if you're suddenly in that situation, you want the information or you need the blood, then you're wishing that other people would do it. It's the same that we all want the answers. Michael, tell us all the things about our sleep to do it, but you know, often we don't want to participate in, you know, arrive that. We're all part of the same team here, guys. It's team humanity. We're here to help each other. So if you're interested together, then please have a chat with Michael or engage michaelgrandner.com. So please go and check that out. And thanks again for the great work you're doing, Michael. So we've got another great question coming here from Steve, who says, Michael, do the hours I sleep matter? Not just how much I sleep, but between what hours of the night or even day is the first part of that question. So it's a great question, and again, maybe someone for shift work during the night hours but sleeps during the day hours. You know, does that actually you know, influence anything in any way that we know of?
It looks like that in terms of many of the health and longevity outcomes, including naps in your total sleep duration counts. That said, having most of your sleep occurring during the day is associated with worse outcomes in general for two reasons. Now, these may or may not apply to you, but one reason is it's usually very difficult to sleep during the day. So most people whose daytime hours are reserved for sleep because they're working night shifts or something, you know, there's a lot more light, a lot more interruption, a lot more noise, and they tend to sleep less in general. They're way more likely to get 5 or 6 hours on average. Even if they're spending 7, 8 hours in bed, it tends to be more broken up because there's a lot more interruption. So there's the timing angle of it in terms of just the practical sense. But then there's also these biological rhythms, and many of them assume that you're trying to get sleep at night. And so, for example, the amount of slow wave sleep, which are the stages where you have most of the rebuilding and restoration, the reason why you can nap for an hour during the day and not get into slow wave sleep, or if you're napping for more than an hour or so and you wake up and you feel horrible, it's because you probably slipped into some slow wave sleep. But you're not going to get it within the first 45 minutes to an hour of daytime sleep usually. Whereas if you went to sleep at night, you'd be in slow wave sleep within 15 minutes. The reason for that is, your body is prepared to nap during the day without making you incapacitated and reserving that for at night. So when you're trying to sleep for longer periods of time during the day, you'll notice if you look at your brainwave activity, you're not going to have as many of those big slow waves, which is indicative of some of the really intensive healing and restoration process. You could potentially shift your rhythm so that your day becomes your biological night, but it's very difficult to do in the real world and to maintain, because you have to maintain that consistency. So I guess what I'm saying is there's a few reasons why people who tend to sleep during the day don't do as well long term, and it's based on the practical nature as well as biological rhythms. But theoretically, it's probably possible. But it would require physically shifting your entire day-night cycle through using light and melatonin, for example, very slowly over time. It's kind of a complicated process, but it's theoretically possible. But in general, it's probably not as healthy as sleeping at night. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a great answer. Thank you, Michael. And probably just touching on that a little bit, there's a second part to Stephen's question,
Sure.
and some other ones coming through that is related to about napping. And says, yeah, if I nap during the day, does that mean I can sleep less during the night? And then Selena has a question that follows on from that, saying, does it matter if it is the sleeping hours in a row, or do naps count? So could you just share a little bit about that, this whole concept of napping with us? And
yeah, in general, naps count, but really there's two kinds of naps. There's naps by choice and naps by necessity. So naps by choice are, where you're saying, look, I've got some time in the afternoon, let me take a power nap. Naps by necessity are, I'm falling asleep during the day. I have to sleep because I can't stay awake. Now, if you're napping during the day because you can't stay awake, that's indicative of your problematic sleep at night, and those naps probably aren't going to be very helpful. They're more a symptom than a solution. They probably help a little bit, but they're not making up for whatever lost sleep you have. If you're choosing to take a nap, I could stay awake, but I'm choosing to take a nap here. Those sort of naps, there's actually lots of data showing that they're extremely helpful and beneficial. They're good for brain function, they're good for mood, they're good for reaction time, and people tend to do better when they nap during the day, especially in the middle of the day. The later you nap, the longer you nap, so the longer naps get you into slow wave sleep, which you want to avoid for naps, but you want it at night. And the later naps, the closer you get to at night, again, it's your brain starts getting confused as to whether this is nap or nighttime sleep, and your brain does different things, whether it thinks you're napping or whether it thinks you're getting your nighttime sleep. And even still, the nighttime sleep, like I said, the average person wakes up a number of times at night. It doesn't all have to be all at once at night. You can break it up into 2 or 3 periods at night, and you're probably fine. But yeah, naps count, with a little asterisk, that if you're napping because you just can't function, it's probably an indication that there's something else you need to fix. But if you want to add a little 30, 45-minute nap or even a 20-minute nap to your day, you'll probably find some real nice benefits.
Awesome, Michael. Thank you. That's it's very clear, and this information just so powerful. You delivered so much amazing content already for us, and I very much appreciate that everybody's getting so much out of this call just by looking at the comments that are coming through and the questions that are coming through. So thank you so much for that, and thank you for all your questions, guys. We're doing our best to get through them. Beverly asks a really great question here that says, Michael, thank you for everything that you're sharing. So important. Do you have any insights on how sleep quantity or quality is related to dreaming? I find that I remember some nights but not others. It's a great question, Beverly.
So dreaming is fascinating. So there was a ton of great dream research done in the 60s and 70s, you can probably imagine, but then it sort of hit a wall, and we hit the end of sort of where we were technologically. But over the last few years, dreaming research has sort of taken off again, because we're now better able to explore, we better have the technology to explore how the brain is working during dreaming. And it looks like dreaming is critical for memory consolidation and emotion regulation. And so there's a lot of really important things going on here. So dreaming happens pretty much exclusively during REM sleep. And REM sleep, you have these 90-minute cycles during the night, but they're not all the same. The first couple cycles are going to be mostly slow wave sleep with very little REM. But the latter half of the night is where you're getting most of your REM sleep, which is also why a lot of times when you wake up from a dream, it'll be toward the end of the night, because that's when you're getting most of your REM sleep. So people who are sleeping shorter, are getting a lot less REM sleep, so they're probably dreaming less. And that might be one of the reasons why not getting enough sleep isn't good for you, because of the important functions that dreaming serves. Since you're getting most of your REM sleep later in the night, and if you're cutting your sleep short, that's sort of what a lot of what you're cutting off is some of the brain function. But so in terms of quality, the other thing too is when people's sleep is very fragmented and choppy, and they're up and down and up and down, they might not get nice big consolidated periods of REM sleep, and so that might interfere with dreaming. So two things may happen. When you become deprived of REM sleep because you're up a lot during the night, especially if you have sleep apnea, which is worse during REM sleep, so you're getting a lot less REM, you get rebound. So when you get into it, you REM harder and faster and deeper. And so sometimes people describe really intense dreams. And it's because, so the really intense dreams usually is often not a signal that you're getting excessive REM sleep. If anything, it's a signal that you're a little REM deprived. And so the REM that you're getting is stronger. And sometimes those dreams can wake people up and be disturbing. So that's how quantity can affect dreaming by reducing it. And quality can also affect dreaming by keeping your sleep shallow and you're not quite able to maintain REM sleep. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for answering that. And I hope that helped a lot with the questions there. So we're going to jump to probably one last question here that I'll combine a couple together. We've got Linda asks, my hormones are out of balance due to thyroid meds, which I've been on for about 20 years. I've created a very healthy mind, body, spirit environment for myself, but I still don't sleep well. Do you have any suggestions? And I'm just going to jump in and combine that with another question from Leslie that asks, can you speak a little bit about the use of melatonin? I'm curious if it's an acceptable sleep aid or will it cause you to become dependent upon it? So just, I guess, a general answer there maybe for all those that are listening in that are having some trouble with sleep, that may be having diseases or issues.
Yeah, so the good news about CBTI for insomnia is that it seems to work no matter what other medical conditions are present, because what happens is, by the way, my screen is frozen up, so I hope you can hear me. So if you're having trouble sleeping, definitely talk to your doctor about it. Maybe sleep meds might not be the best option for someone like you, but there are other approaches. Regarding melatonin, there is quite a literature out about melatonin. So what melatonin does, it's not necessarily a sleep inducer so much as it's a signal to your clock. So what melatonin is it's a signal that your brain gives to your whole body that it's nighttime. So you naturally ramp up secretion at night, it peaks during the night, and drops off sharply in the morning. So taking melatonin won't necessarily help you get to sleep so much as it tells your body about what time it is. So for example, if you're taking some melatonin in the middle of the day, when it's light out and you're not naturally producing it, you're not really going to get much of an effect because your body doesn't really do anything with it. If you want to take melatonin at night, like for example, right before you get into bed, it's probably not going to have much of an effect because you're already producing it at that point. The key times to take melatonin are right about the time it's ramping up. So, and everyone, it's a little different, so it's tough, but a good rule of thumb is, between dinner time and bedtime, a few hours before, a couple of hours at least before going to bed is usually a good time to get the best bang for your buck with melatonin. And also, what that will do is it sort of tricks the brain into thinking it's later than it really is. Your brain says, my levels were here, now they're up here, it must be later, let me shift my whole rhythm over. And so I'm going to start falling, my melatonin's going to ramp up a little faster, my whole biological night is going to start a little faster, so I'll get into sleep a little faster, but I'll wake up a little bit earlier. Your whole rhythm is going to shift. It's a clock shifter, not so much a sleep inducer. And if you take it at the end of the night, right before about the time you're normally going to wake up, you can extend your biological night a little bit, which is good for traveling. Usually people aren't trying to sleep longer, they're trying to wake up earlier. But that's also why it's not a sleep inducer, it's a clock shifter. But that's also why taking more doesn't necessarily help. So the literature basically revolves around either 0.5 milligram or 3 milligrams, but taking more doesn't give you extra benefit If anything, it might backfire. So it seems to be relatively safe for the long term, especially in adults. But you want to keep the dose low, and you want to be particular about the timing. And you might want to mess around, play around with the timing a little bit to see where you get the best effectiveness. So yeah, most people use melatonin incorrectly. They think it's like a natural sleeping pill. It's not. It's a clock shifter, and it only really works well at your transition points. If you're already in your biological night, it's probably too late. If you're deep in your biological day, it's probably way too early to be effective. Does that make sense?
That's beautiful, Michael. Thank you so much for sharing that. Everything that you've shared on this call has just been very, very practical, very tangible, and a lot of great information that we can all take on board for our sleep benefits. So I know that we're pretty close on time, so I want to just take the opportunity to say a huge, huge thank you for giving up your time to be here, Michael. I hope you had enough sleep last night and didn't need to get up too early for this interview. But yeah, everybody, the questions that came through, thank you so much. There's a lot of tangible information. If you're looking to support Michael, please get in touch with him. Please, everybody, visit michaelgrandner.com. The link is in here, michaelgrandner.com. Please check out the work that Michael's up to and support. And as Michael shares, it's up to all of us together to be able to achieve what we need to achieve for this research, so we can all know more about our personal health status. But there's so much information, so many tangible tips that we have, Michael, for anyone in a state of sleep deprivation, or anyone looking for naps, anyone looking for other tips of relating your bed with sleep and getting up and doing other boring things, not engaging things if we're not sleeping. So many tangible tips. So thank you so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us today. Thank you all for being here and for investing the time into your own health to learn a lot more about how you can start to take these understandings and implement them into your own life. Please like the Facebook page to get all the updates and the gifts and the bonuses and the goodies and all the speaker schedule information. And please check out and subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you can get free video replays of Michael's session and all the other experts that have been talking about everything to do with health over this last 2 weeks. And the last thing we'll ask is please share this with your family and friends. We can't achieve all this amazing research and knowledge and sharing and making a big difference in the world without you sharing this with the ones that you love the most. So thank you all for being here. Michael, thank you once again. We really appreciate it, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.